Since ancient times, people hunted, fought and defended themselves. And they invented weapons for those purposes. At first it was made of stone, then metal. Civilizations developed and weapons improved. Now, unfortunately, the world is also familiar with one of the most terrible kinds: nuclear weapons. But there is one type of weapons that not only brings death, but which is being admired. It is known and used in hundreds of countries. With its help, revolutions are made. It is depicted on many coat armors and monuments. People name their children by its name. And the history of its invention is connected with a simple guy who worked on the railway somewhere in the outback of the Kazakh Semirechye. How did Mikhail Kalashnikov get in the Kazakh steppe? He lived here with his brother, and his father lived in the Altai territory. In 1938, before the war, he worked in the depot. How did the ordinary guy manage to come up with world's most reliable firearms? He didn't have such qualifications. He was not an engineer, not a university graduate. What is the secret of the impeccable work of the Kalashnikov assault rifle? It was kept in the freezer for a day, down to -50 degrees. What other secrets are kept in the history of this weapon? Watch all this right now. Weapons have always attracted not only men but also women. It does not matter how you feel about it, but people have always used and will always use weapons. It is in our history. There are many types of weapons in the world, but today I would like to talk about one rifle which is known almost everywhere: the Kalashnikov assault rifle. Strangely enough, its story keeps many secrets and mysteries, and some of them became tales and legends. My name is Andrei Slozhin, it is the Time Puzzle, and today we're going to learn everything about the rifle and its designer. Despite worldwide fame, the creator of the same-name rifle, Mikhail Kalashnikov, can be called a very mysterious person. There are so many legends around his name that it's rather difficult to understand where is the truth and where is the fiction. The first thing that a beginning researcher finds out is myths about Mikhail Kalashnikov's birthplace. Someone claims that he was born in Kazakhstan. There are those who say that the place of his birth is the city of Izhevsk, and that Mikhail lived next door to the Izhevsk plant for the production of weapons. In fact, these two versions are not entirely true. Kalashnikov lived in Kazakhstan for some time, but this is not his birthplace, and the Izhevsk plant was formed much later than the birth of the designer. A writer and local historian from Taldy Kurgan, Andrei Berezin, told us about the real birthplace of Mikhail Kalashnikov.
Kalashnikov родился в селе Курья Алтайского края. 60
Kalashnikov was born in the village of Kurya of the Altai territory, 60 kilometers from the railroad Barnaul-Semipalatinsk. It is his small motherland. He was born in 1919. The family had 17 children, but only 9 survived. The rest of them died in early childhood. Mikhail had 6 brothers and 2 sisters. His parents were completely illiterate. However, as it turned out, his father studied in the parish school for 2 years. Misha was intellectually curious, and when he was a kid he was interested in engineering. But it was all childish games, of course, and for some reason he was scolded for all sorts of metalware, with which he constantly brought home. In 1930, the new government recognized the father of Mikhail Kalashnikov, Timofey, as a kulak, rich peasant, and their entire family was exiled to the Tomsk region, to the village of Nizhnaya Mokovaya. According to some information, after studying there till the 10th grade, other sources claim that till the 7th, Mikhail decided to return to his homeland, to the village of Kurya, having previously changed the name in the passport, so that they would not find out that he was the son of a kulak. In his native village, Mikhail got a job at the machine tractor station. It is not known for certain why he decided to radically change his life, but in 1936 he left for the steppes of Kazakhstan for a small station Matai. The crew of the Time Puzzle also visited that place. The village of Matai is located 113 kilometers from the administrative center of Almaty region, the city of Taldy Kurgan. The road runs through the wild but picturesque steppe spaces. Traveling to these places, we cannot help imagining that exactly these views were open to the young Mikhail Kalashnikov when he first came here. In the village of Matai, we met with Jibek Kovaldanova, who spent her whole life here working as a history teacher and who knows everything about her native place and its people, including Mikhail Kalashnikov. The construction of the Turksib began in 1927. It was finished in 1931. Trains got on the road a year later, and he came to work here in 1937. Then the foundation of our depot was laid. Many years have passed since that time. We do not know where his house was located. Then in Matai there were no big houses. There were small houses. They were called diggings. These are small houses in the ground, half in the ground and the roof above the ground. The word digging speaks for itself. Immediately upon arrival in Matai, Mikhail Kalashnikov got a job in a new railway depot. He worked first as an assistant fitter and then as a record keeper. In 1938, at the age of 19, he was drafted into the Red Army and sent to serve in the special military district of Kiev. There he acquired a profession of the mechanic driver of the tank and served in the 12th Division, which was located in the city of Stry in western Ukraine. And here he began to show his inventive abilities for the first time. His military biography is very interesting. Already in 1940 he became acquainted with Zhukov. At that time, Georgy Zhukov was commander of the troops of the Kiev Special Military District, and at that time he held a grade of General of the Army. And as it turned out, the acquaintance of Kalashnikov with Zhukov was not just bowing acquaintance. The general had a special attitude towards the young inventor. Zhukov gave him a nominal watch for a very useful invention. Kalashnikov invented a special device for the motor capacity record of a tank engine. The device for recording the motor capacity of a tank engine was the first invention of Kalashnikov, which was recommended for serial production. But first, Kalashnikov with his device was sent to the Kiev Tank Technical School for the production of the prototypes. After the tests conducted there, the record device successfully passed comparative tests in Moscow. Then it was sent for revision to the Leningrad plant, named after Voroshilov, for improvement and launching into batch production. However, the author of the invention did not witness those events, since the Great Patriotic War began. Mikhail Kalashnikov was again drafted into the army, where he became a commander of the tank in the rank of senior sergeant. Already in October, Kalashnikov was wounded near Bryansk and was sent to hospital. According to historians, while in the hospital for the first time he began to think about the development of weapons. Mikhail Kalashnikov was wounded in 1941. He was sent back to his native land, to the Altai territory. But he decided to stay here in the Matai, so he got off the train. Because before the war he worked in our depot, his relatives lived here. His father was a railwayman. For a long time he wanted to make weapons. He shared his thoughts with the authorities. His suggestions were approved, he was given one workshop and the most experienced turners to help. And behind the closed doors he created weapons. Here is how Mikhail Kalashnikov describes his first conversation with the head of the depot. By the standards of wartime, as I now imagine, just because of this request, he could send me to some of our competent authorities to figure this whole mess out. where such brazen man came from and why would he need to make weapons. But apparently, my namesake had a really reasonable view of the actions of each person. And he did not make a decision in the heat of the moment. Having learned that I had worked as an accountant before the army, Kalashnikov completely melted away, sat me down in a chair, began to question me about frontline affairs. At the end of the conversation, both Kalashnikovs came to an agreement that they would work on the creation of weapons in non-working hours. Kalashnikov, the head of the depot, promised the designer Kalashnikov that he would select for him qualified specialists: a milling cutter, blacksmith, locksmith, and electric gas welder. One of the people involved in the creation was a local smith, Ilyas Kushukov. His grandson, now Akim of the Matay Rural District, Rustam Musagulov, told us how he helped in the production of the first model of the rifle.
Атамыздың аты жөні Сүлейменұлы Ilyas Kushukov. Енді оны көбісі Kushukov Ашей деп таниды.
My grandfather's name was Ilyas Kushukov. Many knew him as Ashay Kushukov. He was my maternal grandfather. He was a jack of all trades. He made cradles for children, made hammers from railway rails, many other things. We still keep these things. I remember him well. He also told me that he did some parts of the Kalashnikov assault rifle with his own hands. The box body, the crab of the firing mechanism. He forged these details and passed through the machine. Three months later, the submachine gun was ready. They decided to conduct tests, and an unpleasant incident came into picture. Kalashnikov obtained several hundred cartridges in the local military enlistment office. A box filled with sand was installed in the depot. They fired several shots. All the workers of the depot ran to the noise. As Mikhail Timofeyevich said later, they got punished by the depot chief. Later, the shooting was conducted at night, far into the steppe. We heard from the elders that they were running after him. They wanted to see how he was testing weapons, but they were not allowed to come close. They looked only from afar. In the end, the representatives of the so-called Depot Engineering Group decided that Mikhail should go to the capital of the Kazakh SSR, Almaty, and present the invention there. All representatives of the group gathered to see off Kalashnikov. He was handed a package with the inscription, "This is for you, Mikhail, from our brigade," with signatures. As the designer noted later, this group was international. It included Russians, Kazakhs, Ukrainians, Tatars, and many other people. The comrades asked Mikhail to open the package only when he left the station for at least 800 kilometers. Kalashnikov fulfilled their request. There was food in the package. Later, Mikhail Kalashnikov will note in his memoirs, "I was very impressed. They did not have enough food for themselves, but they thought that I would need it more." In Almaty, another unpleasant incident happened to Kalashnikov. Once he arrived in the city, he went to one of the local military commissariats with a request to an appointment with a chief enlistment officer. Just imagine, the wartime, a wounded senior sergeant with an unknown weapon in his hands, like a German Schmeisser, looking for military commissar. Of course, he was immediately arrested and put in a cell. Fortunately, everything was straightened out and Mikhail was released. A thorny and long journey of weapon development had begun. First, Kalashnikov worked in Almaty, then he was transported to Uzbekistan, and only then the weapons were submitted to the main artillery directorate of the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army. The vice president of the Almaty Region Federation of Practical Shooting, Anatoly Bychkov, told us about it. He proposed a new automatic weapon system developed by him. And in his 27 years, he had a sample of this rifle. With this sample, he went to Moscow in order to prove that his project and its automation is the most reliable, easy to operate and cheap. This is the basic principle of the Kalashnikov assault rifle: reliability and simplicity in manufacturing. He competed with such bug names as Mosin, Doktorov and Shpagin. With these recognized designers of that time, they were the main designers of their factories. And he proposed his automatic mechanism instead of theirs. In general, during the war, engineers and developers of the Soviet Union were constantly working on new types of weapons, including automatic weapons. Mikhail Kalashnikov, a known inventor at that time, also led the development independently, pulled from the army. The tasks were pretty precise: to increase the rate of fire and the range of fire. The Silver Prize winner of the world on practical shooting, Olga Aksionkina, told us about it. In fact, development has been carried out since 1943, because the leadership of the Russian State Security Committee understood that our weapons are inefficient, outdated, and foreign models exceed ours. Therefore, it was decided to create a new weapon, which was supposed to have a longer firing range, that is, up to 400 meters, and to have an intermediate cartridge that would be suitable for several types of weapons. It also had to be a reliable weapon and easier than the existing weapons. I have been engaged in shooting for quite a long time, but I entered professional sports 2 years ago. The Kalashnikov assault rifle is the best for me, because I consider it to be the most reliable weapon I can trust, and which allows me to achieve all the skills necessary in the sport. By the way, now there is a lot of talk about the fact that Mikhail Kalashnikov copied his drawings of a submachine gun from another weapon, which was invented by the German designer, a member of the Nazi party, Hugo Schmeisser. As it turned out, this is not entirely true. There are a lot of differences in the external and the internal mechanism. That is, originally AK-46, which is little known, it really looked like a Schmeisser gun. Mikhail Kalashnikov took the best of all technical achievements at that time, but this helped the designer not to reinvent the wheel. He presented the first sample of a Kalashnikov assault rifle. It was called AK-46. Little known, very few people know it. He took the base from the German Schmeisser, but this sample was rejected. It did not go into service because it had a number of shortcomings. For example, the platoon handle was on the left side, which clung to the clothes of the soldiers when they crawled. The fuse and the fire selective mechanism were in different flags. It wasn't handy. Well, and various design inconveniences which did not allow to put this model into service. Few people know, but Mikhail Kalashnikov was really familiar with Hugo Schmeisser. The German gunsmith was captured in the middle of the war, and in 1946, under secrecy, he was sent to Ijevsk, where he began to work in a secret research institute. Some researchers argue that Kalashnikov also worked there and created his weapons in collaboration with Schmeisser. However, the acquaintance of the two designers happened only in 1948. At that time, the Kalashnikov assault rifle had already been created and accepted for production. But let's go back to the time when the development was not complete yet. Once again, Kalashnikov began constructing a new submachine gun. A year later, this weapon again was presented at the contest. All the mechanisms were strikingly different from its predecessor. He succeeded. He was allowed to the next stage of testing, and he reworked the rifle, which no longer looked like the AK-46. It was AK-47, already known to everyone. It had the cartridge of 7.62 at 39. He connected the fuse with a fire selective mechanism, moved the cocking handle to the right side, modified the lockwork, the breech block. But this rifle had a poor accuracy of fire. But it was reliable enough, which met the requirements of the army. Before the rifle was weaponized, it had to undergo serious tests. The Soviet Union had a very reliable system for testing of weapons. The weapon was tested from -50 to 60 degrees to +50 degrees in all climatic zones. At that time, the Soviet Union occupied a huge territory, and the climatic zones were different, from the north to the south, where the temperature reached 50, including frosts, water, sand, mud and swamps. The Kalashnikov assault rifle met all these requirements. It was kept in the freezer for a day, down to -50 degrees. It was kept in the water for a day. It was kept in mud for a day. It was pulled out, blown off, cleaned and immediately used. None of the weapons in the world can withstand such tests. During the tests, Kalashnikov discovered one very significant flaw in his brainchild. During state tests, or was it still factory testing of weapons, during the finishing work, all roughnesses and shortcomings were eliminated. It showed that the tolerance of shaky parts was very small. And when it was tested in the field, in the sand, in the dust and mud, it showed that during the action in the mud, the jamming occurs, the delay, the self-loading mechanism refuses to work. Jamming is a specific term for the delay in the supply of the cartridge, which makes shooting impossible. To eliminate it, soldiers had to disassemble weapons, wasting precious time, which in the conditions of war would mean losing a life. But together with a group of his engineers, Kalashnikov figured out how to avoid this jamming. His engineers proposed two ways. The first, to increase the gap, or close the bolt support, to ensure that there is less dust. Mikhail Kalashnikov asked to increase the gaps between the rubbing details so that the dust crystals do not hamper the work of rubbing parts and self-loading mechanism. According to the results of the competitive tests in 1947, the AK-47 assault rifle was recommended for use by the Soviet Army. The Commission compiled a report in which it was said, "We recommend the 7.62mm submachine gun designed by Senior Sergeant Kalashnikov for acceptance into service." A year later, in 1948, Kalashnikov was sent to the city of Izhevsk for a military plant where mass production of weapons began. In early 1949, by decree of the government, the AK-47 was adopted. In the same year, Kalashnikov received the Order of the Red Star and the Stalin Prize. It was the highest award of that time. Now you can see the AKM submachine gun production year is 1964. This is a modernized Kalashnikov assault rifle, which entered service in 1959. It had a smaller weight and already had nothing to do with the same Schmeisser, including its appearance. That is, we already see this famous, worldwide famous image, including a curved magazine which is explained by a fairly conical type of cartridge case 7.62 by 39. This curved magazine is only in the Kalashnikov assault rifle, and it is recognized all over the world. Kalashnikov did not stop at the AK-47. He began to develop the already modified versions of these weapons. Thus, the Kalashnikov assault rifle was upgraded to AK-74 Ram assault rifle. In the 70s, small pulsed ammunition 5.45 to 39mm was taken into service in the Soviet Army. Kalashnikov developed weapons for them. He again participated in the competition and again won it. Such kinds of Kalashnikov assault rifles as AKM 7.62 modification, AK-74 for 5.45 rounds with light weight, RPKs for Kalashnikov's handguns, various civil carbines, Saiga smoothbore guns were produced. And in general, if we talk about the figures, the Kalashnikov assault rifle, the whole family, the civilian, combat and small arms of the Kalashnikov assault rifle is about 1/5 of all small firearms in the world. It's no wonder the Kalashnikov assault rifle is depicted on the flags of many countries of the world. They even name their kids Kalash in Africa. According to preliminary estimates, more than 70 million rifles were produced in the world. By right, the Kalashnikov assault rifle is the most famous weapon in the world. But Mikhail Timofeyevich did not stop on AK-47. Soon he began to invent a civilian analog of this weapon. The champion of the Republic of Kazakhstan for practical shooting, Maksud Joraspayev, told us what is the difference between military and civilian weapons. The main difference is the lack of automatic firing on civilian weapons. That is, all civilian weapons are semi-automatic. For each shot, we must pull the trigger. Automatic weapons that are used in military action have one feature. You can pull the trigger once and make a series of shots. Few people know, but the hunting rifle Saiga was developed in 1970 at the personal request of the first secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Kazakhstan, Dinmukamed Kunayev, to the Secretary General of the CPSU Central Committee, Leonid Brezhnev. The thing is that the herds of Saigas that migrated through the Kazakh steppes trampled down or raped agricultural crops of local collective farms. Hunters armed with smoothbore rifles could not cope with a huge number of animals. Saiga is a civilian version of the Kalashnikov assault rifle. This is not the alteration of some military models, it is exactly the factory-made, originally civilian weapons. It is hunting, sporting and for entertaining shooting. The Kalashnikov assault rifle was used in many military clashes. It was a convenient, easy to use and cheap to manufacture weapon, which would work in almost any weather conditions. The geography of its use is quite extensive. The Kalashnikov assault rifle has a number of tactical advantages over other foreign models. These advantages were used by many countries of the world. That is, 50 foreign armies use the Kalashnikov assault rifle. The very first war of Kalashnikov was in Vietnam, when the Americans attacked the Vietnamese. Then it was Korea, Africa, the Middle East, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria. The Kalashnikov assault rifle works everywhere.
В Афганистане автомат Калашникова используется только потому, что это единственное оружие, которое может выдержать.
In Afghanistan, the Kalashnikov assault rifle is used only because it is the only weapon that can withstand the climatic conditions there, such as sand, dirt, dust, rain, cold snow and heat. And the automatic carbines of other systems, the same M4, M16, they cannot tolerate some excesses of nature. Despite such a harsh activity, friends and acquaintances of Mikhail Kalashnikov spoke of him as a kind, calm and sincere person.
Человек он был неординарный, рассказывал довольно интересно.
He was an ordinary man. He was a good storyteller. He was an educated person. He was both a patriot and an honest man. Kalashnikov has apologized to the nations of the world, saying that he did a terrible thing, and he asked for forgiveness. Because we admire the weapon, and it was made for the destruction of people. That is, his humanistic feelings were very great. Yes, he came to this at the end of his life, and he was not afraid to say it loudly, to declare it. Mikhail Kalashnikov was married twice. First wife, Yekaterina Ostakova, worked with him together in the Matai depot. In 1942, they had a firstborn who was named Viktor. Mikhail Timofeyevich soon left to present his gun. The family stayed at the station, but unfortunately in 1956, Kalashnikov's wife passed away. Some researchers say that she died under the wheel of a train. Mikhail Timofeyevich came for his son and brought him to Ijevsk. The second wife of Kalashnikov was Yekaterina Moiseyeva. She worked as a technician designer. The woman had a daughter. Kalashnikov adopted her. Later, he had two more girls. By the way, the eldest son of Kalashnikov from his first marriage, Viktor, followed in the footsteps of his father and became a designer of weapons. He accompanied Mikhail Timofeyevich on his trip to Matai in 2003.
Осы ауылға келген кезде үлкен кісілер, жан-жақта аудан, облыс болып өте үлкен деңгейде ол кісіні күтіп алған.
He was greeted as a hero. Officials from the region attended. He was met at a high level. Then he was asked why you came here. Can you do something, or do you have other goals? He showed his modesty and education. He said, I have not forgotten my story. I hope that you have not forgotten it either. I wanted to look at this village, walk along its sand, quench my thirst with its cool water, see the neighbors with whom I lived.
Көрші көлемімді көргім келді, тұрған үйімді көргім келді. Енді өкінішке орай мен аралап көрдім, бірақ тұрған үйімнен ештеңке қалмапты деді ол кісі кезде. Бірақ көрші көлемдерінен үлкен бір-екі кісі.
Of course, he was disappointed that his old house was demolished, and only a couple of people he knew existed alive. I do not remember their names now, but I saw how he came with his children. They were all grown up. They literally admired their father. He said that he'd like to fish on the river Aksu, as he often did when he was young. We have fulfilled this desire. He even had time to shoot a gun. It was clear that he had missed our country very much. I watched from the side. My father was among those who met him. I noticed that he was a very modest man. He is a legend, a world-famous person, but he behaved very modestly. I really liked it.
Бірақ сондай қарапайымдылығы мен өзімнің жүрегімді баурап алды.
Kalashnikov worked almost until his death. In 2012, he had problems with health. Mikhail Timofeyevich was hospitalized in the Republical Clinical Diagnostic Center of Udmurtia. Then he began a recovery, but in 2013 his health went downhill. Kalashnikov was transported to Moscow, where the doctors again put the designer on his feet, and he returned to Izhevsk. On December the 17th, the designer felt ill and was hospitalized again, where he died on December the 23rd, 2013, at the age of 95. Today there are new developments of automatic weapons for soldiers. They are much more accurate, better, more effective. They shoot farther. Their trajectory of flight, their ballistics are much better. But the simplicity of self-loading mechanism, the reliability of this mechanism, and according to the ballistic data, it is not much worse than other weapons. It is inferior to the leading manufacturers today. But its advantages, I repeat once again, are simplicity and reliability. And for the next 10 to 20 years, it will remain the most mass-produced weapon. To date, it has more than 50 million copies worldwide. No small arms have such a number of releases. In 2007, the Telegraph compiled a list of modern geniuses based on a survey of more than 4,000 Britons. The selection was conducted on several factors: the role in changing the system of use, public recognition, the strength of the intellect, achievements and cultural significance. As a result, it included such outstanding personalities as Bill Gates, Quentin Tarantino, Nelson Mandela, Stephen Hawking, Dalai Lama, Grigory Perelman and many others. The name of the designer of the famous automation Kalashnikov is also on this list. No doubt, Mikhail Kalashnikov is an outstanding man whose invention has changed the world. However, very few people know, but in his spare time he was engaged in the design of other, more peaceful adaptations. For example, in the Kalashnikov Museum, which is located in the city of Izhevsk, there is an automatic rotisserie and lawnmower which he constructed using the engine from a washing machine and a cart for the transportation of cans. By the way, it still works. However, there is no doubt that his main achievement is the Kalashnikov assault rifle, the development of which he started in Kazakhstan. My name is Andrei Slozhin, and it was the Time Puzzle. See you.